Hello and welcome. Uh, I am Beck Diamond, Executive Director of Civility First, and I want to say hello and welcome you to our political forum this year, October 2021. Civility First is a not for profit organization on Whidbey Island. We exist to change the current norm around civil public discourse and just how we have conversations with the ones who are closest to us. We do this by sharing tools for conversations, both group and interpersonal communication. And your support helps keep us going. So at the end of this event, I'm just going to drop a link into the chat. Feel free to click on the link and donate to Civility First to keep our events and workshops free for everyone in our community and beyond. And I am going to turn it over to Ken Harvey.
Well, thank you, Beck. So my name is Ken Harvey. I am going to be the moderator for tonight's forum. I am delighted to work with Civility First as an organization. They have a mission that is very near and dear to my heart. And I am delighted tonight to have two guests with us. Melanie Bacon from Island County and the Island County Commissioners, and Greg Gilday, who serves our area in the state legislature. So I am not going to delay essentially bringing them into this this forum discussion. Melanie, I'd like to start with you. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's discussion. We're gonna discuss a number of things around the issues of civility, and especially civility in the public sector. And I'd like to just ask you to maybe introduce yourself to our audience and let them know a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Well, sure. Thank you, Ken. And I'm really happy to be here. My name is Melanie Bacon, and I'm the Island County Commissioner for District 1, which is all of Whidbey Island, just south of Oak Harbor down. And so I have, I have two ports, and I have two ferries, and I have a couple cities, and a lot of rural areas of intense development, and so on and so on. It's kind of a complicated district, and this is my very first time. So first time I've ever ran for public office, first public office I've ever held, and I've been a county commissioner now since January.
Well, congratulations, and hopefully there's no need to give you any commiseration or condolences for choosing to serve this way. Just want to thank you for the service you've rendered thus far.
Thank you.
We also have with us Greg Gilday. Greg, wanted to invite you, provide you the same invitation to just let our audience know a little bit more about you and the work that you do.
All right, thank you, and thank you for putting this on tonight. So my name is Greg Gilday. I am the state representative from Legislative District 10, which is all of Island County, Northwest Snohomish, and Southwest Skagit counties. That's what it is now. We're in the middle of redistricting, so it might change a little bit going forward. I'm an attorney by trade. I've been practicing here in Stanwood for the last 16 years. I'm third generation at my law firm. Grandfather started here back in the early 60s. As with Melanie, this is my first run at political office. I was elected last year. I was sworn into office in January. I've been to Olympia for a grand total of about 2 hours now, since the entire session was done on Zoom, which I think added a little bit to the incivility, unfortunately. So hoping to get back down there in January when the next session starts.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you both for that, for your introductions. It just strikes me that it's just interesting. I find it fascinating that both of you are relative newcomers to elected office, and I would love to just start with a question of why did you choose to get involved in an elected position and government work the way you have?
So I have been had been the Human Resources Director for Island County for the last 10 years. And I worked very closely with the county commissioners during that entire time. And what I really appreciated about the county commissioners was, you know, they'd have their arguments when we're in public. And then when you had to work with them in an executive session, which is when you talk about things like union negotiations or maybe someone you might have to fire or different kinds of things, you can't do it in public. The collegiality between the three of them and the comradeship and you know, the sense of humor between them was always such a lovely thing. And I was always really struck by that. And then when Commissioner Helen Price Johnson announced that she was going to resign and ran for a different public office, then the question was, well, who can step in there and keep that cohesion together? And I realized that I could do that, And my desire to run for this office was really solidified on a trip across the ferry when I was, you know, I'm from the Mukilteo ferry coming over to Clinton. I'm looking at the islands and I was just really struck with how much I loved Whidbey and Camano and my desire really to be a caretaker. And I knew that I would enjoy this job. And in fact, I really have. This is a good fit for me. I'm really happy to be here.
Fantastic. What about you, Greg?
So I've always been interested in politics. I was a borough delegate. I was up in Alaska in high school. We don't have counties, we have boroughs up there. And I was a borough delegate when I was 18 years old. So I've been interested in politics for a long while. Always knew that I wanted to serve in some capacity. For the last since I think it was 2012, a friend of mine, Dave Hayes, was in the state legislature. And so I was able to see a lot of what happened down there. And that kind of just piqued my interest even more. I was able to spend some time down there with him. And that was something that I, at that point, had my eyes set on that, okay, I'll run for state legislature one day. I didn't think it would be this soon, frankly. My kids are only almost 13 and newly 15. And so I was planning on waiting a little bit longer, but when Norma Smith decided that she was going to not run for re-election and asked me if I'd be interested in running for her seat or the seat that she held, after some long thoughts and prayers and talks with my wife, we decided that this would be a good time to get into it. You know, I'm one of those that I like to dig into the policy. I like to have those conversations. I'm one of those nerds that actually like to watch TVW. And I don't know how many of us there are out there, but I would often watch TVW and just, you know, turn on a committee hearing and just listen to see what's going on. So it's always something I wanted to do, and this was a good time and opportunity to jump in.
Well, I think that there are a lot more people in the audience for TVW and C-SPAN and other local public government affairs channels than maybe most of the public would likely admit to. For some, it may be a kind of a secret addiction that they have. So, but it's always wonderful to know that there are people who are interested in knowing what's happening in government, and also wanting to actually be part of or listen in on those conversations that are happening between elected and appointed officials. So it's part of what makes our governments work effectively. I would like to just point out to our audience that they may or may not know that one of you essentially kind of ran with the partisan label of being a Democrat, and one of you ran as a Republican, and so you were elected. What happens when you run with a kind of a party label and then find yourself elected? Do you simply just represent those who voted for you, those who might see themselves with the same label, or do you find yourself representing a constituency that's a lot more diverse?
Um, I represent all of Whidbey and Camino Island, every single person, whether they voted for me or they didn't vote for me. And I listen to them all and I pay attention to them all. And certainly, and I'm sure Representative Gilday, it's the same thing. When you talk to somebody, you talk to a constituent, you don't ask them what party they belong to. That's utterly irrelevant. You want to know what their problem is and how you can help them. That's what's important. And one of the things Representative Gilday and I have never been on the same forum interacting with one another before. So this is a fun thing. But one of the things I really appreciate is watching him and Representative Paul, who is also not of the same party he is, but clearly they are working together. And because it's for the common good for everybody. There's two Democrats and one Republican on the board of Island County Commissioners. And we are a whole together because the three of us represent everybody. And we're always aware of
And I'll just say that my wife considers herself a Democrat, so if I tried to just represent Republicans, I'd have a big problem. So no, I'm there to represent the 10th legislative district. Again, like Melanie said, whether you voted for me or whether you didn't, I have talks with lots and lots of constituents. One of the policies that I had, well, two things I want to bring up. One of the policies that I had going into office was that I was going to have an open door policy. That whether I thought I agreed with you or whether I thought I didn't agree with you, I'd take the meeting and we could have a conversation about whatever it is that you wanted to talk about. And one of the funniest moments looking back on my first session was a meeting I had with the ACLU of Washington. And at the end of the meeting, I thanked them because of the conversation that we had. And I told them that as a Republican, if you had told me a year ago when I was running for the seat that I'd be in a meeting with the ACLU of Washington, nodding my head saying, you know what, that's a really good point, I'd tell you were full of it. But there I was in a meeting with the ACLU of Washington, nodding my head saying, you know what, that's a really good point. And so we're not going to agree on everything, but we can actually have dialogue over those things that we do agree on and work towards solutions on those. And you know, since I've been in office, the 10th legislative district, for those of you who don't know, we're one of 4 legislative districts in the state that has split representation. Every other district is either all Democrat or all Republican. So we have a unique opportunity to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. And so I really do appreciate working with Dave Paul. And you know, we don't agree on everything, obviously, but there are things that we do agree on, and we're working for what we can to improve the 10th legislative district and the state.
So Greg, I appreciate what you and Melanie have just shared with us about kind of working beyond party labels. Because I wanted to ask both of you, what does being civil mean to you? And I'd like to pose that question to you, but it seems that both of your answers already to the previous question kind of answered this question in advance as well. But if someone were to walk up to you and just ask you, what does being civil mean? How would you respond, Greg?
You know, to me, it's the ability to listen and to talk with somebody who has differing views than you, and not assigning them evil intent, or just saying, oh, you're a Democrat, you must be wrong on everything. You know, just like I don't think you should look at me and say, oh, you got an R next to your name, you're just a racist, bigot, homophobe, you know, because it's not the case at all. And so I think that we just need to be open to, you don't have to agree with everybody all the time, but you can have conversations with them. You can passionately argue with somebody and then go have dinner with them, you know, and that's okay. You know, passion is not a bad thing, but I think it's just the ability to have a discussion, have disagreements, and still not be assigning bad intent.
So Melanie, would you agree or add anything to what Greg just shared?
I agree with him completely. I have just a real simple definition for me, it's just using words and actions that show you respect the other person, even when you disagree with them.
So were you taught those kinds of skills as a child? I mean, did you see it modeled as you were growing up?
That's such an interesting question. I'd have to say kind of yes and no. I came from a household where my parents yelled a lot, and if we ever raised our voice or disagreed with them in any way, there were dire ramifications. So mostly I'd have to say no.
Well, was there, oh, go ahead.
There was a book, though, that came out when I was a young adult that I thought was kind of nice. I don't know that anyone ever reads anymore. What's it called? Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Yes, I remember that.
And it's, part of that is, being nice to people, sharing, being respectful. Those are just real basic things. And I really cling to that.
I do recall that book. When I saw it for the first time, I thought it was very meaningful. But Greg, same question. Did you grow up with civility skills being taught to you or seeing them modeled?
As with Melanie, I'd say yes or no, but I'd say more to the yes side than the no side. And just an example that pops into my head is I remember walking through the Stanwood Camino Fair one year. It's this great fair we have locally here that I've been to since I was a baby, and my grandpa took me to to lunch at the local Democrat booth. They serve hamburgers every year, and I asked him, why are we supporting the Democrats? And he jokingly said, "Oh, it's because they need all the help they can get." But what it really boiled down to is, look, they make good burgers. We can go and have lunch there, and we can help them out. And they're our friends, and they're our neighbors, and this is not a political thing at this point. And so it's, but that's the kind of thing that I saw a lot growing up. Is you can have your beliefs, but that it doesn't mean you have to ostracize the other side.
Well, that actually, I think, raises a very common issue that happens with incivility, and I'm wondering if either of you or both of you find yourself at any time engaged in situations in which you're seeing incivility in progress, and where someone either is being incivil to you, or you're maybe with a group of what you thought were like-minded individuals, and you're discovering that they're essentially demonizing someone or some others that they don't agree with.
You're asking an attorney and a state rep whether or not he sees incivility. The answer is yes. And I think you're seeing it a lot more nowadays. And I don't want to use Facebook and Twitter as scapegoats, but I think a lot of it has to do with Facebook and Twitter, because there is this huge public forum that people utilize, and they can just jump on and spout off whatever comes to mind. And a lot of it is stuff that they would have never said if they were standing face to face with somebody. And so I think you see a lot of it nowadays on Facebook and Twitter and all the other social medias that are out there. And I think that that's kind of driving the process a little bit more in today's world.
I completely agree with Greg about that one. So, for example, I went through a really nasty primary campaign, and a lot of quite hurtful acts of incivility were directed my way, particularly in social media. That's what happened. And so the way I responded was I recognized that most voters are alienated by negative campaigns. I think that is true. At least the kind of people that I want to have supporting me are people who would be alienated by those kinds of campaigns. So when those things happened, I would respond once, providing the truth in a civil way. And then when they doubled down, I just ignored them. And I found that fights are no fun when the other person won't participate. So I just don't.
Well, that's, Melanie, I really appreciate your saying that. I was going to ask, how do you respond to incivility when you see it directed towards you, or feel it being directed towards you? And I was struck by the kind of the stark truth in your response a minute ago about incivility can be very hurtful. And so even if the person is essentially reacting to you or acting out towards you, slinging truth, the truth that they think that they possess, um, the way in which they do it can really create an emotional impact on you, and it can be very difficult to not simply react in return. But you mentioned two responses there, responding with the truth,
Mhm.
and also if that didn't seem to work, simply ignoring the person. In social media, that that might seem effective, but have you found that that is effective by itself when it's more of a face-to-face incivility situation, or you're on the phone with someone, or it's more of where it seems there's not a sense that there's a barrier that social media creates that the other party can hide behind?
I think that people have a hard time being really grossly uncivil to me face to face. I think just because of my mannerism and the way I am and the way I talk, and I think I project a kindness, and so I have not had, even in all of my life, very many cases that I can't even think of one now where someone directly right in front of me face to face continued berating me. I can tell you that if that were to happen, I'd do what I said. I would say, I'm done. I'm not participating in this. This is over, and I would walk away. That would be my response.
Yeah, thank you for that. Greg, have you found that there are any other skills that Melanie did not mention, or techniques that you've used that you found um, either worked for you, or actually the opposite, they did not work?
Well, I think one skill that I have found that works occasionally is just letting people vent. I have had some people come into my law office and they're just on a tirade, and they just need to yell and scream and all that. And it's like, okay, you just need to vent a little bit. Fine, I'll just let it roll off my back. That's not a problem. And then we call them up later, and they apologize, or at least they are not as angry anymore. And so I think that sometimes works. In the political world, I think it was within the first month of taking office, I got a scathing letter from somebody. And so I called her up. I said, let's have a conversation about this. And we ended up having probably it was like a 20 or 30-minute conversation over the phone. And again, at the end, we did not agree on everything, but at least we were talking in a tone that's like, okay, I can see where you're coming from, and I don't agree with that, but we don't have to hate each other for it. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I have found that so often when someone is uncivil, they're often surprised when you don't respond in kind.
Yeah.
And they can be disarmed by it, and in being disarmed, shocked by it, suddenly there's this opportunity to show that you care enough to want to better understand where they're coming from, and that suddenly opens doors that otherwise wouldn't be open. So yeah, thank you very much for those for your responses. Have you come to a point in your in your life or in your service as a public servant where you feel that every interaction has to be civil?
No.
Yeah.
No, excuse me. No, excuse me. No. I think they have, in my world, they do have to be civil. I think that I can see a situation. So for example, if someone's at the podium and they're yelling a racist tirade, or they're threatening some people, or some other similarly utterly unacceptable thing, unless they're doing that, I think we must always be civil. In a situation like that, though, addressing them with civility might be challenging, but even then, trying to diffuse the situation by speaking in a calm manner and not saying anything demeaning is the best way to get them to calm down. So if someone's screaming at you, you just talk more quietly. So yeah, that's yeah, I guess I misunderstood what you're saying at first, and then I had to rethink that. I think that
Well,
yeah.
Melanie, I appreciate what you've said, and you just shared a technique that really does seem to work. And for those members of the audience that were tuning in tonight and to this recording, hoping to walk away with techniques for civility, what you mentioned in terms of just even speaking more quietly, so that they actually have to bring down their tone level so that they can hear your response, really does work to help de-escalate uncivil situations. The way that I asked a question uh, did in some ways maybe communicate that the answer was the exact opposite of what I was actually intending. So it wasn't meant to fool you, but the question I asked was, does every interaction have to be civil? The reason why I asked that is increasingly in a cancel culture where there's this growing sentiment that um, civility is not always the right thing to bring to the table. It's not always the right and appropriate way um, to approach others. There's this underlying assumption that no, you only show respect when you're shown respect. You only are civil if you are shown civility. But if someone if you feel like there's a grudge um, or or some history of kind of inequality or grievance, then no, you just dispense with civility and um, you pick up other tools and use them. And I would just like to kind of hear how you feel about what seems to be happening in society right now.
Well, I'll just chime in here real quick on a couple of things. One, as far as do you always have to be civil? And I would say, no, you don't always have to be civil. There are those cases where you don't have to be. But I also think that it's important to remember that civility, you got to look at the context as well. Because sometimes raising your voice and getting passionate about something is a civil way to go about having a debate on something, whereas other times it is completely inappropriate. And so I think you really need to look at the context of the overall. And sometimes it is okay to mock people if you're mocking the people who are in power, if that's a way, you use satire or something like that in order to try to bring them back down to reality. And then the other thing is that you brought up how it's kind of this circular effect where, you weren't civil to me, so I'm not going to be civil to you. And then the first person says, okay, well, you just treated me uncivilly, so I'm going to do the same back to you. And it kind of brings to mind the Hatfield and McCoys. At some point in the future, you're not even going to remember why you're disagreeing with each other. You're just being uncivil. And so sometimes it's a lot easier to look at, quote, the other side and say they're being uncivil and then looking at your side going, oh no, we're fine, we're just doing it because they're doing it. And sometimes you need to be the one to kind of break that cycle, and that gets to where you were talking about, you know, using a quiet voice, you know, not giving them what they think that you're going to do, coming back with a conversation instead of a diatribe. And so so those are the 2 points that I'd like to make there.
So Melanie, I would just love to just ask you a question that's a follow on to that, and that is, you know, what do you think happens when civility as a kind of a norm of society essentially just gets cast aside?
I think that, I mean, I think your question was really good when you started talking about cancel culture, because what cancel culture does, it replaces civility with self-righteousness. And so then me and all of my people in my group can sit here and be self-righteous against those other evil people out there. And when you do that, you eliminate the possibility of dialogue. Dialogue disappears in that kind of a situation. So, you know, we're all created equal, and that means that we all are deserving of respect. And so.
But Melanie,
Yes,
self-righteousness feels so good.
it does, you know, it does. You get this kind of like serotonin charge or something out of it. I know it's a thing that people have to learn, that this is not a good touch. This is a bad touch.
Well, how I'm thinking that what Greg used as an example of kind of receiving a scathing letter early on, and his approach is probably I'm wondering if that's really more the norm than the exception for elected officials. You know,
It absolutely.
how often do you receive kind of complaints that are just scathing and derogatory, and you know, and then do you find yourself being given many different opportunities to kind of practice civility?
Yes. What happens is we get a couple different kinds of these letters and phone calls, and some of them are attacking us personally, and some are just angry because of an issue, and the person feels we're on the wrong side of the issue. So the case that Representative Gilday spoke of, I you know, I never saw his letter, but if it was for me, if it was a case where the person was angry about my stand on fireworks or whatever, then I can have a conversation with them. I can call them up. I can say, listen, tell me more about how you feel, and I'll tell you how I feel about it. But if they're just trashing me as a person, frankly, I'm not going to, I have no inclination to call that person up or interact with them, because I don't see that there's going to be a place where we're going to be able to, there's no room for compromise, you know.
Yeah.
And I'll just say you hit the nail on the head. That letter was all about issues, and it wasn't even about what I had done. Well, I guess some of it was about what I had done personally, but a lot of it was what the Republicans are doing. And so, and, you know, and I'm just kind of lumped in with all of the R's. And so, but it was one of those that it was attacking the issues and not personally. You know, it's kind of the same thing with my open door policy. You know, I'll sit down with any group that wants to have a meeting and talk about the issues that you want to talk about. But if you start yelling and screaming at me about what a horrible, no good, very bad person I am, that's when the meeting is over.
So as elected officials, how do you go about really working effectively with the crusaders that you encounter? Those the crusaders and the activists and those who are so impassioned um, impassioned for an idea or a position that they hold, or who find themselves outraged on behalf of others. How do you kind of ensure that there's that you can work with them effectively, and where does civility fall in as an approach?
So one of the things that, oh,
Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I tell people is that, don't mistake volume for effectiveness. And just because you're hearing something on Facebook, if you're, a lot of people on Facebook, and I hate to say this again, and I hate to keep using Facebook and Twitter as scapegoats, but a lot of times people surround themselves with like-minded people and never open themselves up to the other side of the argument. And so, and you hear a lot of this yelling and sniping and complaining on Facebook and Twitter and other social media. And so I remind them that volume doesn't equal effectiveness. And then the other thing is that, I try to explain to people a lot that there is very little out there in the world that is black and white. It's not necessarily a clear yes or a clear no. And so when somebody calls me and says, how on earth could you ever vote for that bill? And I'll tell them, it's like, these are the things that went into my thought process. And a lot of times they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that side. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. And one of the examples I use for that is the Blake bill fix. So early in the session, the Supreme Court came down with a case, it was the Blake case, that ruled unconstitutional felony possession of drugs. Okay, and they brought this bill in at the last minute during session that would make drug possession a misdemeanor, and it would give the cops some ability to get in there and have contact with drug users in order to help them get to the right treatment that they need in order to get out of the drug scene. And and so I thought that we needed to have something to give the law enforcement the ability to do that. However, there's also a part in that bill that makes drugs legal in July of 2023. Now, did I want to vote to legalize hard drugs in July of 2023? Absolutely not. But there was more good in that bill that outweighed that portion that I'm hoping we can go back and revisit before that date comes, because I don't want that to happen. So there's a lot more in crafting law, and there's a lot more into these issues, and it doesn't boil down to 140 character talking point.
Melanie, did you want to add anything to that?
I got so involved in Greg's answer, I forgot what the question is. Ken, what was the question?
The crux of the question was, as you find yourself dealing with crusaders and activists and those who are really impassioned, how do you use civility as a tool to keep the conversation and the relationship effective and
Right,
positive?
thank you. Well, it's very true that the squeaky wheel gets the most grease. That's a true thing. And for us as county commissioners, if we have a lot of people angry because there's all these people parking on Eby's Road overnight and they can't be doing that anymore because they're dumping their waste in the beach and so on. And commissioners, you have to do something about that. And angry and upset about that, we have to listen and listen to their concerns and think, is their concern reasonable outside of the context of the tone of their voice? And in government operates so slowly that we are not going to go change a law on a dime based on someone yelling at us this second. We're going to listen to what they have to say. We're going to listen to other people who maybe have a different perspective. And then we're going to have dialogue about how best to respond to the issue that's being raised here. But we don't confuse the passion with what's really important.
Yes, thank you. Greg, were you going to add anything to that? Okay, I really appreciate you saying don't confuse passion for what's really important, and sometimes it would seem that the only thing that matters is the volume, but not the substance of it. And I am, I just really want to give our audience this opportunity to really kind of glean the different techniques and skills of civility that the two of you put into practice so that you can be effective in the roles that you serve in. I'm wondering if, as we have talked a little bit about the cancel culture and some of the tone and tenor of the communications that you receive, I wonder if, what do you feel is your level of confidence or hope um, in the trend of civility in our communities and in our country? Do you feel like that we're moving towards civility becoming becoming the norm, or becoming the norm for the first time, or do you feel like we are moving towards civility um, disappearing?
I don't think it's disappearing. I think that people are hungry for responsible, professional, civil conversations. I think that those years that we've had just a lot of screaming, and I think that people are really turned off of all political persuasions. People are turned off. They want to hear what's really going on, and they want the truth, and they don't just want someone screaming at them. So I don't think that civility is gone. I think that we can. I feel hopeful about it. Truly, I feel hopeful about it. And all you have to do is look at local government. Whether you look at the meetings of your local governments, not the school boards. Right now, school boards are having a problem. But if you look at city councils and you look at county commissioners, most county commissioners, you look at port district meetings. I mean, all of these different functions, we all just get in there every day and we just slog along, and we're civil to one another because the work has to get done, and we want the work to get done in a way that's best going to serve the citizens. And I think that's going to be the standard everywhere.
I wish I was as optimistic, but if the other side would just get their act, I'm just kidding. No, but I think that's what it kind of goes down to, is that yes, everyone says that they want more civility in politics. Everyone says they want more civility in society, but it's never their fault. It's always the other guy. And as long as you have it's the other guy's mentality, you're not going to have a more civil society or civil politics. I think the people involved in it are civil enough. It's I would like to say I had more interaction with my colleagues down in the House, but with Zoom it was really hard to have any interactions outside of just our normal committee meetings. But those committee meetings were by and large civil, and the floor debates were by and large civil. From what I hear from other members, when you're down there in Olympia, everyone operates in a civil manner, even though they may not like each other. But I think we need to get past the point of always reading bad intentions into the other side, because again, it's always, as long as you have the mentality of it's that guy's fault for not being civil, we're not going to get there. I'd like to keep working on it. I'm doing my part, trying to raise my kids to be civil young gentlemen. So,
Well, I think that is really important. There's a saying that we are the change we're looking for, that we're expecting, that we're hoping for. And is your sense that that civility has to start with us first, or are you really looking for it to start with those who are dishing out the scathing comments?
I think it's got to start with us. Honestly, it's because somebody's got to break the cycle. I was talking about it earlier, and if you can be the one to break the cycle and surprise somebody else with your response, instead of having it come back as a counterattack, essentially, and instead of, hey, let's just have a conversation about this, and we can agree to disagree, but let's have a conversation about it. I think that's where you got to start it.
Yeah, I liked your question, Ken, about modeling behavior, because I've been thinking, where the heck did I learn this? When I was a single parent and I had 2 boys, and I created a sign and I put it on our refrigerator. It was the rules for this house, and the very first one was everyone speaks kindly to to everyone else. And everything else kind of flows out of that. And I'm so proud now of my adult boys who are fathers of their own kids, because they have just these kind and gentle conversations with their children about expectations and their kids, or what. I mean, honest to God, I would have never dreamed coming out of the household that I came from that this would be how my children would be, and their homes would be. People do generally follow the way things are modeled. And so in government, if we are acting as though it's perfectly okay to be screaming at folks, then people will think that that's perfectly okay. But if we make it really clear that we have these expectations and standards, and everyone's going to comply with them, then that's going to flow from that.
Gosh, Melanie, I love that. In a minute, I'm going to give each of you kind of a chance to share some final thoughts, um, based upon our conversation this evening. But I wanted to set that up with just mentioning that Civility First is an organization that is a nonprofit organization that is really looking to help people figure out how to build the bridges that divide us, and so that we can work effectively with one another, so that we can live effectively with each other, so that we can sit down at the dinner tables together and just discuss things that maybe we ordinarily disagree about, and not feel so separated, so isolated from each other, or just living in an echo chamber. I think, as Greg mentioned earlier, that can sometimes happen within social media. The conversations that we've had tonight, and some of the things that you both have shared in terms of techniques that you've used, I think are things that our audience should be able to pick up as tools for their own toolbox. But I'm wondering if you think that there are some things that Civility First could offer or should offer the public to help in creating this trend towards a more civil set of communities and a more civil society.
Um,
I think go ahead, Melanie.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying when we first started, Greg, about social media. I think that social media is, I mean, it just, it occurs in social media, and it's expanded in social media, and they egg people on, and people are egged on in social media. They're just brought to this height of anger,
Agitation.
And so I would encourage Civility First to think about ways they can bring the civility message into political organizations' communications, both internal and external, because I have to say that a lot of political groups will say really uncivil things about the other side in their internal communications when they're talking to one another in social media, and in their advertising, and if you think back to the election and think about some of the campaign materials that were put out there was some really ugly things. And so I would like to see Civility First kind of think of ways that they could kind of encourage political organization communications, both internal and external, to be more civil.
And Greg, did you have a thought earlier?
Well, just how Commissioner Bacon brought up mailers and things like that in the political world during campaign season, and I agree that people are turned off by the negative campaigning, and that's why I try not to negatively campaign at all. Unfortunately, again, it's the other side, and this goes for both sides. Will take something you say and they'll say that it's spiteful and that it's uncivil, and they'll just get themselves whipped up into a frenzy about it. And I'm all for having policy debates. Let's look at people's records. I expect that when I run for re-election next year, that people are going to look at my record and either like how I voted or not like how I voted, and take that one way or the other. and we can have discussions about that. That's not negative campaigning if you're questioning my policy decisions. Yeah, the mudslinging, it really should stop because it doesn't benefit anybody, except for the political consultants.
Well, last question before I give you an opportunity to just have some final words. I think both of you have in your comments tonight have talked a little bit about um, that civility as a set of techniques that actually helps create more effective dialogue and deepens relationships versus destroys them and separates people. But it's also clear that you were saying too that being civil does not always mean agreeing with one another, nor does it always mean simply being nice on the surface. So how would you both what advice would you give others who find themselves in the workplace or in school or other areas of their lives dealing with incivil behaviors, um, maybe rude people, and what advice would you give them or um, well, to help them kind of be more effective?
I think that people should be thinking about what is the long game here. Is what's important to me to win this little tiff with this person right this second? Is that what really matters? Or is the thing that really matters for us to be able to resolve a problem? Because if resolving the problem is what's important, you need to be civil. Find some way to have a civil dialogue with that person, or at least keep the door open in some way so that you can revisit it with them later on after they've calmed down. You really in your interactions, at least in the political arena, and I would say anywhere out there, think about what the long game is. Think about, do I want to ruin this friendship? Do I want to never be able to speak to my sister again? My three sisters are all very conservative Republicans who have completely different viewpoints than I do on virtually everything. I would never want to alienate them because they are, I love them so much and they feel the same way towards me. So then when we have conversations, we're just very careful. If we disagree about something, we're very tentative about it because we want to make sure that we're not going to hurt the other person. Relationships are more important than this. In most cases, the relationship is more important than this stupid thing that we're dealing with right this second. And we need to find some way to get past this to solve the actual problem.
And I'll just say that's well put. It reminds me of a farmer that came into my office once, and he had a life saying that was, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And really what it boils down to is, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, okay, is this your main thing right now? And is this worth going to battle over? And generally when you ask yourself that, it's not. And, and sometimes you agree to disagree. My wife teaches second grade. She's been a school teacher for, I don't know how many years now, but a good long while. And she used to come home and tell me stuff that's happening in her school, in her classroom, in her union, all this stuff. And it would just get my blood boiling a lot of times. And we just agreed that, okay, we're not going to talk about that anymore because it's not anything that is going to affect our relationship. And me getting mad at your union or me getting mad at your school district is not going to further anything along the way. And so sometimes, like Melanie said, you got to agree to disagree.
Gosh, I appreciate those points both of you made, and I wanted to give you this kind of a final opportunity to share any thoughts that you'd love to just kind of end with. Greg, I'd love to just kind of go first and give, and then Melanie can can end.
All right, so I guess my parting thought would be just a very simple thing. It's remember the golden rule. Treat others how you want to be treated. And if you can live by that, that's going to solve a lot of issues, and that's going to create a lot of civility in life.
Thank you, Melanie.
I think that remember that everyone wants to know that they are important and that they are respected. Everybody wants to know that. Everyone wants to know that they are important. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I'm going to be the chair of the Board of County Commissioners next year. And one of my goals is going to be to reduce turnover in this very difficult labor market we have right now. I want to reduce turnover. And one of the best ways you can do that is to improve the morale of the people. And if the people knew how much we treasure them, how much we respect them, and we spoke in a way that reiterated that to them all the time, I think that would help with the morale that our employees have. And you can there's ripples of that go all the way out. Everyone wants to feel important and respected. So just remember that.
Thank you both for those very precious comments. The golden rule, treating others with respect and appreciation, creating this sense of mutual value and valuing our relationships, and especially with an eye towards the long term. Those things are so utterly important. And I think by doing those things, we really do help solidify a foundation of civility between us, and find that we are then much more effective in getting things done. I want to thank Melanie Bacon from the Island County Commissioner's Office. Um, Melanie, thank you so much for your service to our island county, and for being with us tonight. And also Greg Gilday from State Legislator from Legislative District 10. We appreciate both of your service, the life experience that you've brought into these positions of authority, and we hope that you, our audience, have enjoyed this conversation and this opportunity to hear how these two amazing individuals are using civility in their daily practice. And I just want to remind our audience that Civility First is an organization that was formed to essentially help build bridges across those things that separate us and that create differences. And we are all about having civil discourse in whatever sphere or sector of life we're operating in. And we are looking for your help to be kind of partakers in this work with us, practicing civility in your own lives, and also coming alongside us and helping us provide more and more tools for those who are looking for tools they can use in their own life's work. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We hope that you have learned some things, felt validated when you've been practicing civility on your own, and will go forward and join us as we model civil behavior towards each other.
Bye-bye.
Melanie, Greg, that was fantastic. Thank you